So if you look at the current automotive landscape, Chinese automakers are facing an estimated cumulative 125% tariff wall just to get their electric vehicles into the United States.
Right, which is just massive.
Yeah, a penalty that big makes importing a car mathematically impossible. So what do? They don't, try to climb the wall. They are quietly and strategically figuring out how to just walk right around it. Welcome to Auto News Talk.
Glad to be here for this one.
If you're listening to this, you probably know the feeling of walking onto a dealership lot, smelling the tires, negotiating over floor mats.
The classic experience.
Exactly. But what you don't see are the massive, completely invisible forces reshaping what you are even allowed to drive and exactly how the dealer is trying to sell it to you. The global auto industry is fundamentally restructuring its entire supply chain just to survive this brutal margin squeeze.
It really is brutal out there.
Yeah. So consider this your exclusive behind-the-scenes tour of the automotive battlefield. To help map all of this out, I've got our resident industry expert here. Welcome to the show.
It is fantastic to be here. And, battlefields really is the right word. If we want to understand what's happening to the cars in your driveway, we kind of have to build a mental map of the terrain.
Okay, let's build it. Where do we start?
We're going to trace the entire life cycle of automotive profitability. We'll start way upstream, looking at giant global tariff walls and severe battery supply bottleneck.
It's a big macro stuff.
Right, exactly. Then we'll look at how those massive upstream costs are forcing legacy automakers to drastically change the very vehicles they offer you. And finally, we'll land right back on your local dealership floor where entirely new technologies and scrappy sales tactics are fighting tooth and nail for every single dollar.
I like to think of the entire industry right now as a giant tube of toothpaste.
A tube of toothpaste. Okay, I'm listening.
Yeah, so when global tariffs and supply chain shortages squeeze the absolute middle of the tube, all that intense pressure forces every last drop of margin out at the ends.
Oh, yeah. I see where you're going with this.
It means the manufacturer has to rethink their whole factory, and the local car salesperson has to figure out how to, monetize a routine service visit just to keep the lights on.
That is a perfect way to visualize it. And the hands squeezing that tube the hardest belong to international trade regulators. The transition to electric vehicles has turned global supply chains into this geopolitical chess match.
Which brings us right back to that 125% tariff wall. There's a fascinating analysis detailing how Chinese EV makers could reach U.S. showrooms through North American production and alliances.
It's a really eye-opening breakdown.
It is. The central argument is that Chinese automakers aren't just, putting cars on boats and hoping for the best anymore. They are actively circumventing direct import barriers by embedding themselves into the North American manufacturing ecosystem.
Well, they essentially have no other choice, right? That analysis points out that the sheer scale of China's output is just staggering. They have this massive domestic manufacturing overcapacity, and they are exporting millions of EVs globally.
Millions?
Yeah, but they can't bring them straight into the U.S. because of that wall. So they're finding the side doors. One major strategy the source highlights is the reliance on partnerships with legacy brands. We are seeing established companies like Ford licensing technology from Geely, or Stellantis holding a major stake in LeapMotor.
Wait, hold on. So the legacy automakers are essentially handing over the keys to the fortress. Why would an established brand help a massive foreign competitor gain a foothold?
Because the Chinese companies have a 10-year head start on affordable battery chemistry.
10 years? Wow.
Yeah, it's significant. The legacy brands absolutely need the cheaper techs to survive, and the Chinese brands need the localized political cover and established distribution networks. It's a marriage of extreme convenience.
That makes sense.
Furthermore, the analysis points out they're utilizing a specific Canadian channel that caps imports at a lower tariff rate to slowly build regional scale. And simultaneously, they're establishing a massive, undeniable foothold in the Mexican auto market.
And let's be honest, the American consumer is not completely opposed to this. A vivid detail from that same analysis is that 38% of Americans would actively consider buying a Chinese vehicle.
38% is a huge chunk of the market.
Right. People just want an affordable electric car, regardless of the badge on the hood.
Which is exactly why this matters so much. Policy choices regarding trade agreements and incoming restrictions on connected car software are ultimately going to dictate consumer pricing.
Yeah.
Regulators are literally deciding what vehicles you are even allowed to buy.
But reading through that breakdown, the big unknown hanging over this entire strategy is The United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement, the USMCA.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, what this source doesn't answer is how the upcoming USMCA renewal negotiations will ultimately resolve auto content thresholds. The regulators could just rewrite the rules halfway through the game and slam that Mexican side door completely shut.
They absolutely could. And we're not the only ones trying to use policy to protect domestic manufacturing. If you look across the Atlantic, the situation is arguably more desperate.
In Europe, right.
Yeah. There's a dispatch tracking how EU and UK automakers are pushing to extend Brexit EV tariff relief as battery sourcing lags.
I feel like panicking might be a better word than pushing.
Panicking is definitely accurate.
The core issue in this dispatch is that the European auto industry is essentially begging regulators for an extension on tariff suspensions. Why? Because their local battery supply chain is entirely too far behind to meet the incoming rules of origin. Can you unpack the mechanics of that? What exactly are these rules of origin?
Essentially, to avoid heavy cross-channel tariffs between the UK and the EU, a certain percentage of the vehicle has to be built locally. The strict threshold requires 55% of a car's value to be European-made.
Okay, 55%. That seems doable.
Well, the industry originally projected that 60% of their batteries would be EU-made by this point, which would easily help them hit that 55% vehicle target.
Right.
But according to the industry groups cited in the dispatch, local battery sourcing is currently tracking at under 20%.
Under 20%. That is a massive miss.
It's a disaster.
If they knew these rules were coming, why is the supply chain struggling so badly to get off the ground?
Because building a supply chain from scratch requires astronomical capital and time. The dispatch highlights the intense reliance on critical minerals that are mostly refined elsewhere. But the real roadblock is the pure cost.
How much are we talking?
The report cites that it requires around $750 million just to build a single mining-to-sell value chain.
750 million? Just for one chain.
Exactly. And that doesn't even factor in the multi-year environmental permitting processes required in Europe.
And the financial reality of operating there is incredibly harsh. The detail that stood out to me in that dispatch was the cost. Comparison battery manufacturing costs in Europe are estimated to be about 30% higher than in China. 30%.
Yeah. When your raw manufacturing costs are a third higher than your global competitor, every single margin projection just goes out the window.
It's completely unsustainable.
If this issue is left unresolved, the implication is that Europe risks slapping heavy tariffs on the exact vehicles they're aggressively trying to promote. It would severely squeeze automaker margins, disrupt model lineups, and ultimately raise prices for the consumer.
Which feels like a massive contradiction. They have these incredibly aggressive climate goals to phase out combustion engines, but their own trade policies might price EVs entirely out of reach for the average buyer.
That's the irony of it.
But what this dispatch leaves completely open is the regulatory stare-down. Will the European Commission actually blink and grant another delay? Or will they force the automakers to swallow the tariffs?
That is the ultimate game of chicken.
Seriously. But listening to all of this, I have to play devil's advocate for a second.
Go for it.
If building local EV supply chains requires hundreds of millions of dollars and everything costs 30% more to manufacture, how do legacy automakers even survive the transition? How do they keep the lights on while burning through that much cash?
They do it by fundamentally changing their entire business model. They are ruthlessly cutting the fat to fund the future.
Ah, okay. Which perfectly explains an article I saw breaking down how Ford defends its car exit while leaving the door open to a sedan comeback. The argument here is that Ford's highly controversial decision to kill off its sedans wasn't a mistake. It was a necessary, calculated capital reallocation toward high-margin trucks and SUVs.
It is pure survival economics.
Right.
The source points out that Ford is fiercely targeting an 8% profit margin.
8%. That's aggressive.
Very. And if you want to hit 8% while simultaneously funding billion-dollar battery plants, you cannot waste engineering resources on low-margin vehicles. Historically, even at its absolute sales peak, the Ford Fusion lagged far behind competitors like the Honda Accord and the Toyota Camry.
Right, but millions of people still drive sedans. Isn't Ford just handing the entire entry-level market over to Honda and Toyota? I mean, trying to redesign low-margin entry-level cars, like, the focus just wasn't economically viable for them anymore, but walking away from those customers entirely seems risky.
It is risky, absolutely.
Yeah.
But the strategy has been largely validated by their product pivots. The article notes the incredible success of the Maverick, their small, affordable pickup truck.
Oh, people love the Maverick.
Right. It proves that you can successfully push traditional small car buyers into better return body styles. A buyer who would have bought a Focus 10 years ago is thrilled to buy a Maverick in this market, and Ford makes a healthier margin on the truck.
Okay, but the title of that article explicitly mentions leaving the door open for a sedan. How does a sedan fit into a strategy that literally just killed all the sedans?
Well, the executives note that a sedan could only return if it strictly leverages an existing, highly profitable platform. They suggest something under the Mustang umbrella, where the heavy development and engineering costs are already fully amortized across other vehicles.
Got it. And this leads to a detail from that Ford strategy piece that I found incredibly telling. Ford's next big lower-cost EV isn't a traditional car at all. It's a roughly $30,000 small electric pickup.
Which is brilliant when you look at the mechanics of consumer demand, and it illustrates exactly why this matters. Capital reallocation to high-return products is quite literally the only way manufacturers can survive the EV transition.
Yeah.
They're betting the entire farm on the body styles that people are willing to pay a premium for.
It's an aggressive corporate diet. Cut the empty calories, focus entirely on the protein. But what this source completely leaves open is reality versus theory. It is a theoretical door left open. It doesn't answer if or when a new cost-effective sedan will actually get the green light.
Very true. So let's look at the map we've drawn so far. We have global tariff pressures squeezing the supply chain, and we have the manufacturers squeezing their lineups for every drop of margin. Now, the toothpaste tube reaches the end.
Time to talk about the dealership floor.
Exactly, where the rubber meets the road.
Because if the manufacturer in Detroit is desperate for an 8% margin, you better believe the local dealer in your hometown is feeling that exact same squeeze. The days of easy money and massive markups are completely gone.
They absolutely are. And to understand how local showrooms are surviving, we can look at the regular auto retail briefing from Car Dealership Guy.
That's a great breakdown.
It really is.
Yeah.
This digest tracks dealer profits, inventory moves, and industry shifts. The core takeaway from this briefing is that in a rapidly normalizing and hyper-competitive market, auto retail professionals are relying on concise, hyper-focused data to track incredibly fast-moving retail dynamics.
It's almost like they're operating in an emergency room and need a constant vital signs monitor. The briefing covers how dealerships are obsessively tracking profitability trends and daily pricing snapshots just to know where they stand against the lot down the street.
They have to be obsessed. The briefing notes they are constantly developing new inventory acquisition playbooks.
Right.
They're also keeping a very close eye on regulatory shifts, specifically increased Federal Trade Commission scrutiny, which changes exactly how they can advertise prices and structure finance deals. Everything is under a microscope.
And because the margins on the actual metal, the cars themselves, are getting squeezed by the manufacturers, dealers are looking elsewhere for cash. A massive point in the briefing is how dealers are maximizing fixed operations.
Ah, yes. The service lane.
Exactly. That means the service lane, the parts department, the repair bays. They are heavily relying on the garage to make up for lost vehicle margins.
And that is where the real retail creativity is happening on the ground.
Yes. There's a specific, brilliant example of this fixed operations creativity in the digest, the $50 oil change strategy at Bob Roman Toyota.
I love this example.
On paper, a $50 oil change loses the dealership money when you factor in labor and overhead. But they are using this seemingly low-margin service to aggressively drive traffic into the dealership.
Right. Why does a dealer want to lose money on an oil change?
Because it gets your car onto their lift. It builds customer loyalty, but more importantly, it creates opportunities to acquire used inventory.
The golden goose of dealerships.
Exactly. A salesperson can walk into the waiting room, hand you a cup of coffee, and say, hey, we are looking for used RAV4s just like yours. What if we bought it from you today? It's brilliant. And why this matters is that dealer principals desperately need these practical, real-world benchmarks to stay afloat. They have to adjust their strategies on the fly based on data. You can't run a modern dealership on gut feeling anymore.
But the challenge, and what this briefing doesn't fully answer, is the execution. Because it's a fast-paced digest, it doesn't systematically explain how to implement these complex operational pivots on the ground.
Yeah.
Knowing you need a better service lane acquisition strategy is one thing. Getting a dealership staff of 50 people to execute it flawlessly without dropping the ball is another entirely.
Which brings us to the final piece of the puzzle, the technology required to actually execute these strategies. If dealers need to squeeze margin out of every single sales lead and every single service visit, they simply cannot do it with whiteboards and sticky notes.
No, they need infrastructure. And we see exactly what that infrastructure looks like in a product announcement from Keyloop, detailing how they are unveiling an AI-powered sales hub to streamline dealer lead handling and omnichannel selling.
Okay, wait. The key word there is omnichannel. Think about how a customer actually buys a car in this environment.
It's all over the place.
Right. You might start by looking at a truck on your phone via WhatsApp. Then you switch to a text message with a salesperson. Then you email the finance department from your work computer. The platform is designed to centralize all of that customer and vehicle data into one single workflow.
And traditionally, for a salesperson, tracking a customer across WhatsApp, text, and email is an absolute data entry nightmare. Leads fall through the cracks constantly. The Keyloop piece emphasizes that they're bringing AI in from the outset rather than just slapping it on as an afterthought.
Yeah.
The platform utilizes predictive analytics and propensity scoring.
Let's unpack that mechanism because it sounds like jargon.
Okay.
What does propensity scoring actually look like for the salesperson sitting at their desk?
Instead of a chaotic inbox, the AI analyzes all the data points and tries to predict how likely a specific customer is to buy. Yeah, so it might flag a profile and say, this customer has looked at the same EV truck 3 times on WhatsApp, and their current lease expires in 30 days. Call them right now.
Wow. It just takes the guesswork completely out of the workflow. The announcement also notes it enables paperless paths with digital signatures, which dramatically speeds up the closing process.
Speeds it up and reduces errors.
Yeah. But the detail that really stood out to me was how the tool uses campaign-building features that actively rank and segment leads to replace ad hoc communications. Instead of a salesperson randomly dialing numbers from a spreadsheet, the AI dictates the most profitable path through the day.
This represents the literal future-proofing of automotive sales. Why it matters is that it maximizes conversion rates while simultaneously cutting operational costs. It perfectly aligns with how consumer expectations are evolving. Buyers want a seamless, digital-first experience that doesn't feel disjointed.
But humans are incredibly stubborn creatures.
Yeah.
What this product announcement completely leaves out is the psychological hurdle. It doesn't answer how long it will take veteran dealership sales staff to actually trust an AI's propensity scoring over their own human intuition. I mean, a salesperson who has been moving metal for 20 years relies on their gut. Telling them a computer knows their local customer better is going to be a very tough sell.
It's a massive cultural shift for the showroom floor. But when you zoom out and look at all of these moving parts together, a remarkably clear picture of the modern industry emerges. I think there are 3 massive interconnected themes that connect international trade all the way down to that AI software.
I totally agree. Let's synthesize this. The first theme is the inescapable gravity of trade policy.
Absolutely. When we look at the comprehensive analysis of Chinese EV makers maneuvering through Mexico, combined with the dispatch about the EU begging for battery tariff extensions, it proves that geography and border tariffs dictate automotive strategy just as much as engineering does.
Yeah, you can engineer the greatest, most affordable electric car in the world. But if a trade policy slaps a 125% tax on it, the engineering doesn't matter.
Exactly. It's irrelevant.
The second theme is the absolute ruthless pursuit of margin across the board.
Right. We see this in the article about Ford killing off iconic entry-level cars like the Focus just to chase an 8% margin to fund their future.
Yeah.
And at the exact same time, down on the ground, you have local dealers implementing $50 oil changes just to scrape together used inventory, as highlighted in the car dealership guy briefing.
Everyone is feeling it.
Everyone, from the CEO in a Detroit boardroom to the service manager in your hometown, is hunting for every available dollar.
And the third theme is technology as the ultimate lifeline.
We saw this clearly with Keyloop's AI sales hub and the data tactics mentioned in the retail briefing. When the vehicles are expensive to build and the margins are incredibly thin, technology is the primary tool being used to bridge the massive gap between high operational costs and required profits.
But looking at all these strategies, they aren't all perfectly aligned. There are some serious tensions and contradictions happening simultaneously.
Yeah, 2 major contradictions really stand out. First is the tension between globalism and protectionism.
Right.
You have Chinese EV makers actively finding incredibly clever, globalized ways through North American borders. At the exact same time, the EU and UK are trying to build heavy regulatory walls to protect their own lagging, localized supply chains. It's a constant geopolitical game of cat and mouse.
And the second tension is the massive gap between manufacturer strategy and dealer reality.
Yes, automakers like Ford are deliberately cutting their entry-level affordable cars to protect their corporate margins and push buyers into expensive trucks.
Okay. Which makes the dealer's job harder.
Exactly. Local dealers, the ones actually trying to use the Keyloop AI and reading the retail briefings, they still have to fight for every individual lead and run complex omni-channel conversions just to convince a normal consumer to buy that expensive truck. The factory demands high margins. The dealer just wants to close a deal and move the metal.
So if you're listening to this and wondering why your local dealer is suddenly texting you on WhatsApp or, why you can't find a cheap new sedan anymore, what is the practical so what takeaway from all of this?
In today's auto industry, profitability demands extreme flexibility. The landscape is shifting beneath our feet faster than ever before. If you cannot adapt, whether you are a massive automaker trying to figure out how to engineer a $30,000 EV pickup, or a local dealer trying to adopt predictive AI to score your sales leads, you will be left behind.
The old playbooks are officially retired. I love that.
Uh-huh.
And that brings us to the end of the segment of Auto News Talk. The cars of tomorrow aren't just built differently. They are sold, regulated, and priced in an entirely new world.
It is a completely new paradigm from the factory to the driveway.
For your next step, keep your eyes on the upcoming USMCA renewal negotiations. With everything we've discussed regarding tariffs, supply chains, and Mexican manufacturing footholds, that is where the next major domino will fall in this global auto battle. Have you ever wondered if the AI predicting your next car purchase will eventually be the same AI driving it off the lot for you? Keep questioning what's under the hood of the industry, and we will catch you next time.